thinking big. Start thinking in big terms. And he commands them to enlarge the place of their tent, to the right, to the left, it says in that verse, to make room for that which is to come. Now understand something. This verse is not in reference to a physical building or structure, although that's needful and necessary many times. Church statistics say when you start filling 80% of the capacity of your building, it's time to start looking at either expanding your building or building a new building, bigger building, which makes sense. I'd like to have that problem right now. And but here he's not referring to building structures. The tent itself is not the focal point. But instead, the command is to enlarge the place, to widen the scope, to think big, to broaden the horizons. That's the real issue at hand there. We have got to continuously think big and think on a larger scale. The emerging generation of the church, the emerging generation of the IPHC family is on its way, and our church family has to be prepared to make space for them with a spirit of expectation. Now, and I'm talking about the church at large, the church in general. We all have our seasons. We've had our seasons here. And I'm hoping and believing and praying there's going to be more seasons of God moving in particular realms and revival and various ministries, things like that. We still, to be a small church, we do an awful lot in our little community to be such a small. And people are always asking, how do y'all do these things? How do you provide these things? How do you do this? Well, and on answer we can never give them. Well, it's God. It has to be God. And like I shared with some preachers here recently, and I told them, I said, I came to the place years ago, right? And I told you, if you were here, you heard it then. If you weren't here, you hear it now. If you were here, you hear it again. But I came to a determination that I am not the one to build the church. It's God's church. Jesus said, I build a church. Talking about himself. He said, I build. He didn't say, I'm going to send Mike to build a church, or I'm going to send anybody else. He said, I build a church. And the gates of hell won't prevail against it. So what I resigned in was, I will do my part. I'm going to do what the Lord has called me to do, and I'm going to nurture and train and preach and teach and all the things that God has commissioned me to do. But I'm not going to bear any guilt, responsibility, and brunt over the one being supposed to be the one to build a church, because that ain't my job. And so I said before, if God don't build it, it ain't going to get built. I'll trust him, I'll believe him, I'll pray, and I'll labor, and I'll do all these things. But I am not going to bear the responsibility of being the one to build a church. That ain't my responsibility. It ain't your responsibility. But we do have a work to perform together as a church. And Israel, God was preparing them to change their thinking, to change their attitude. Verse 3, he expressly states that your descendants will possess the nations and settle in their desolate cities. So the promise is for the future. Make room for the next generation. We've had our seasons where we've had 30, 40 kids in our youth program. And those 30 or 40 kids, it's been over the years, they grew up, they graduated, they moved on, they moved to another locality, or they moved to another church, or someone who's got our church altogether, unfortunately. But they had the seeds that were planted in them here. Other generations of kids, our Youth Quest program that we have church-wide is one of the greatest programs. We've had our kids from this church before who are involved in Youth Quest. Would love to see it get that level again. And all these programs are designed to help the up and coming generations to begin to prepare for the ministry to their generation. And so the promises for the future. However, looking forward doesn't negate the work of the forerunners of our faith. We don't need to forget those who came before us. We don't need to forget those of us who were here when I was here as a teenager. We don't need to forget the work of Dewey Chavis. We don't need to forget the work of Ann Chavis. Sister Ann is still pastoring and ministering. And she was our youth director when I was here, when I was a teenager. That's when we had a tremendous revival across the entire community, town. We started in this little Sunday school class. You heard me tell the story before. We started this little Sunday school class with 5 teenagers. I was one of them. And we started with 5 kids, and this thing exploded. We started having revival until we had to finally move out to the sanctuary because we had 80-something kids average on Monday nights for Monday night youth services. Every Monday night for the longest time, we did that. And because God was moving, revival was taking place in God. And we don't need to forget those times. God did it before; He can do it again. And we don't need to forget. We don't need to forget. We don't need to forget our Aunt Macy's. We don't need to forget our men and ladies who paved the way. Did you know that next year we're looking at our 80th anniversary next year? And we've already started thinking. We've got to make some plans because we want to have a big celebration for our 80th anniversary. That'll take place in June, and so we want to look at that and have a big celebration. 80 years is quite a milestone. Listen, that should speak volumes to people that just at least 14 years ago, 15 years ago, who went around making a statement we were going to close our doors. Hallelujah, we still here. Glory to God. We have flown in the face of the devil. When all he meant for us was evil, God turned it for good. That doesn't say we haven't had our struggles, but we're still going. We're still going. And so anyway, the promises for the future. We need to always look towards the future, but we don't negate the work of those who came before us, and we need to honor the work that they did. We're going to do that next year at our 80th anniversary. We're going to honor the work of those who were faithful then. And so